In this demo, I'll show you an introduction to the Magnus Workflow Debugger, which can be used to help ensure correct workflow business logic. But first we'll load a workflow, run it, and see what would happen before utilizing the debugger. Here's my workflow. I have some business logic to process some shipment data, and after the data is processed, we need to identify a file and delete it in order to signal that the file has been processed. I think my logic's good, so I'll go ahead and run it. But we hit a problem actually. We got a not found error on this delete. Now let me run the workflow in the debugger. To get started, we'll open the Debug View panel. Here we see an overview of all the tasks in this workflow. To start the debugger, just click the green play icon. At this point, the workflow has started running, but it stopped before running the first task. Now the workflow has started in the debugger, and various debugger panels have appeared. If you've used debuggers in other programming languages, you'll see similar functionality. The workflow is now paused before the first task, as indicated by the red outline. You can see the current state of all the parameters. Here are the workflow debugger controls. First we have the control panel to let you start, stop, pause, and exit a workflow in the debugger. You can also step into, out of, and over tasks. The runtime parameters panel lets you see the parameter changes update in real time. We also have the runtime output panel and the run details updated in real time. Finally, the watch list panel lets you set parameters, JavaScript expressions to watch in real time. You can even check the breakbox here, and the workflow will pause whenever that parameter changes. At this point, it's up to me to control the workflow, and I can also set breakpoints by clicking this margin here. So if I do that on this task, and then continue the workflow, it will run and then stop right before that task. And you can see in the runtime parameters panel that some of the parameters have indeed updated. I can also manually step through the tasks. So let me step into this loop. Now we're on the next task, process shipment. So let's go ahead and run that query. This one takes a little while. And now the next task will encode the file name. So let's run that single task. Okay, so now we can look in the runtime parameters. The return parameter is this, so we can find it over here. What I can also do is click on it and add it to my watch list, and it will update in real time in this list here. So let's go ahead and see why that task failed. So what I'll do is compare this file name to the one in the cloud storage. We see the file is there, but the date format is actually different. This is just the year, month, day, but over here it's populated with the dashes. But that date is actually coming from the table here. It's coming already formatted with the hyphens. So what we need to do is remove the hyphens. Place dashes empty. So I'll stop this debug session, save the workflow. Start it back up in the debugger. I'll go ahead and break before this one, move that one. So we'll run the workflow until that last task. So now we'll look at it, and now it has the date without the hyphens like we expect. So when I continue this workflow, it should succeed, and it has. Workflow succeeded. As I mentioned briefly, the watch list is a very powerful feature. You can watch parameters, you can even evaluate expressions, and if you use that break checkbox, the workflow will pause whenever that parameter changes. There are some potential issues you should keep in mind. When you are debugging a workflow, it's generally prevented from running by other means, like by a scheduler or remote execution or manually. And also the actual workflow logic is executing. So if you were to stop debugging the workflow in the middle, you could leave things in a bad state. And consider that the debugger can time out if you're not actively using it. And here are some other limitations. As I mentioned, it has an idle timeout of 15 minutes. And the maximum duration you can debug a workflow is 2 hours, even if it's actively being run and used. You can't step into task internals or subtasks or other workflows that you might start. You can't step into the individual lines of code from the script task. And that's all for now. If you have any suggestions, feel free to email us. Thank you.